Hello, today what we're going to be doing is looking at our first sensor on our robot, and at this point you should have your robot built, and as part of your robot it is critical that we have these touch sensors built on the front of it. Now the wire management on here is not very good, unfortunately, and there are some other sensors on here, but what's critical that we have is that we have two motors on here. We have one in the motor port 1 and then one in the motor port 6, and then we're also going to have our touch sensors, and they're going to be our one that's on the back left is going to be in port 8, and the one that's on the back right is going to be in port 9. First thing we need to do is we need to go into open a brand new file, and we're going to go to motor and sensor setup. And please pause this video at any time if you need to do some of the work, or you need to do some typing or rewind it. So let's do our motors first here. And so motor port 1 is going to be a RobotC motor, and we're going to call it motor C. And it is not reversed, and it's on our left hand side. And then we're going to go to motor 6 port right here and type in motor B, and we're going to go to RobotC motor, and it's going to be reversed because it's on the right hand side, and then it's also, we're going to put it here that it's on our right hand side. So we have our two motors set up, and the next thing that we need to do is we need to do our devices, and we are going to have these two touch sensors right here. And so let's do this one first. It's going to be on port number 8. We're going to call this one bump L. The reason why we call it bump L is because on the left hand side. Sensor type is going to be a bumper sensor, and then on port 9 is going to be bump R, and we're going to do a bumper sensor again. So we have our bumper sensor set up, and then we also have our motor set up, and we should be good to go. So now I'm going to hit OK. So now that you have this all set up, we are going to we need to make sure that the debugger works and make sure these ports are working. So let's hit download the robot. And we have no code. You have to save it first, and let's just call this one touch. And please save it on your H drive so you have access to this file later on. I don't have an H drive, but call this one touch. And when you do this, it is looking right now for my robot. My robot's not on, so let me turn it on so it can find it. And hopefully, I'm going to hit download a robot again. And so I just downloaded it to my robot. We have to click download the robot, and what we need to do is we need to go to robot, debugger windows, and then go to sensors and make sure that's clicked. If you don't click on download a robot, it's going to be grayed out and you're not going to be able to see it. So when we do that, I want you guys to be looking right here at bump L and bump R on port 8 and port 9, and you guys can see when I press these bumpers in, like my bump L, the value goes from 0 to 1. So 0 to 1, my bump R, 0 to 1. So I know these work, and I know they're getting data. So that's great. So let's talk about how we're actually going to use them when we code. And within your file, what I want you to do is pause, and I want you to type in this code right here. We already set up our motors and sensors, and this is just the code you want. So hit pause and type this in. Now that you've done that, let's take a look at what this code actually does. I'm going to run the robot here so you guys can see and narrate what's happening and then talk about the code. I'm going to hit download the robot. Then I'm going to hit start. And when I hit start, what's happening is both the wheels are going backwards. They're not going forwards because I want the sensors to be in front. And then when I hit one of the sensors, those wheels are going to stop, switch direction, and then it's going to be over our program. So let's take a look at what's happening here. So what we're doing is we're introducing something called a while loop. And what a while loop does is it is going to repeat the same code over and over until something causes a certain condition to be false. And in this while loop, you have the statement right here that says while, and then you're going to have these things called conditions. Conditions are going to live inside these parentheses right here. Now in this case, we're going to look complicated at first, but we're actually going to have two conditions. You have a condition right here that says sensor value bump R is equal to 0. When we have equal, what that means is that it's checking for equality. So it's not setting a value of the bumper sensor, because the bumper sensor, the value is set by this part right here. But rather, when you have a double equal sign, it's checking for equality. And so when our robot is running and there's nothing touching this bumper sensor, bump R right here, it is going to be equal to 0. So this statement right here is true right now. Nothing's touching it. Then over here we have this double ampersand. And what this double ampersand just means is that this statement right here must be true, and this statement right here must be true in order for all of this to be true. And so we say right now this one is true because it's equal to 0. I press 1, therefore it becomes false. But right now it's equal to 0. Sensor value bump L, which is our left one right here, if it's equal to 0, so it's checking to see what it's equal to, okay, This is also equal to 0 right now, so therefore that's true. And because this statement right here is true, and this statement right here is true, that means the overall whole entire statement is true. And so what's going to happen is that our motors are going to be constantly set to the value of negative 100, which is backwards because the front of our robot, if you look at this, is this way, but we want our sensors to be hitting in the back. So it's going to go backwards. Now what happens in our code is the second one of these two is hit. So the second either this one is hit or the second this one is hit, bump R or bump L, what's going to happen in our code is that this is going to be equal to 1. And the second that one of these statements or both of the statements at the same time becomes false, it's going to stop executing this code and it's going to jump down into our next code. So I'm going to hit download the robot right now. I'm going to show you how this runs again now that we kind of have a better understanding for our code. Now when I hit start right here, it is in this while loop. And what's happening is thousands of times a second. It's happening many times a second. It's constantly checking to see if both of these sensors are equal to 0. And right now, if we look at our debugger here at the bottom, they're both equal to 0. However, the second one of these statements becomes false, where it's equal to 1 and not equal to 0 anymore, it's going to stop executing the code and stop going through this over and over and over, and then it's going to head to this part right here and execute this code. So I'm going to do this in 3, 2, 1, 0. Okay, popped out of it, then it ran this code right here for 1 second. So this is how we use sensors, and this is how we're going to use our touch sensors in our program. Now one last thing that I do want to point out is that in our challenge, your robot's going to have to run forever. And what we have to do is we have to create something called an infinite loop. And so to create an infinite loop in your code, I'm going to tab over one time. I'm going to type in while. And what we're going to do is we're going to have a condition that's just always going to be true. So this condition will always be true. And so what I'll do is I'll type in while true. True is always true. And so this condition will always be true. And our program will never get to our last curly brace there, and it will never end the program. So I'm going to hit enter, and I'm going to put a curly brace right there. And I have to go down to the very bottom, and I have to have a closing curly brace and put all of that code inside of there. Nice thing about RobotC is I can just, I have to click exit out of my downloaded program, is I'm going to click fix formatting. And when I hit fix formatting, it puts all of my white space really nice and it tabs over everything perfectly. I know that all of this code right here, I'll put a little comment here. So I call this a forever loop. And so we have a forever loop, and all of our code lives inside that forever loop, and it will never, ever, ever get past this curly brace, and it will always run this code over and over because it's in a while true loop. To end the program, you have to hit stop on your robot. So using that, hopefully you guys can do the Robo 500 challenge. Feel free to go back and watch this video again. Feel free to pause it, and feel free to look at the code. Good luck on your Robo Mower challenge.